If this is your first time here, this isn't a standalone video. It's one chapter in a complete story, the entire history of evolution, from the first replicating molecules to you. Every organism we mention is your direct ancestor, not a cousin species, not something similar, your actual lineage, an unbroken chain connecting you to the origin of life. That's what makes this different from every other evolution content out there. Most of it is scattered fragments, dinosaurs here, early humans there, the Cambrian explosion somewhere else, all disconnected. But they're not disconnected. They're all chapters in the same story, your story, and you can't understand any link without seeing what came before it. Lungs don't make sense without swim bladders. Mammals don't make sense without reptiles. Each chapter builds on the last, and nothing appears out of nowhere. 4 billion years of your deep history told as one continuous thread. If that sounds interesting, Chapter 1 is in the top right corner. I'd recommend starting there. If you've been watching from the beginning, you already know what this is. Let's keep going. For 150 million years, our ancestors lived as small, mostly nocturnal mammals in a world dominated by dinosaurs. The largest Mesozoic mammals rarely exceeded the size of a modern badger, and most were far smaller, shrew-sized insectivores, scurrying through underbush, climbing trees, or burrowing underground. They had fur, produced milk, maintained constant body temperature, and possessed acute hearing and smell suited for nighttime activity. But they remained ecological opportunists, confined to niches that giant reptiles didn't occupy. Everything changed 66 million years ago when a 10-kilometer asteroid struck what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, triggering the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction that eliminated non-avian dinosaurs and approximately 75% of all species. The removal of dominant herbivores and predators created a sudden, dramatic opening in ecosystems worldwide. Mammals, which had spent the Mesozoic evolving sophisticated sensory systems, complex brains, and behavioral flexibility, were positioned to exploit this opportunity. The immediate aftermath was catastrophic: impact winter, widespread fires, and ecosystem collapse. But mammals had advantages that aided survival through the crisis. Small body size meant lower food requirements. Endothermy allowed activity even when temperatures dropped. Many were omnivorous or insectivorous, feeding on food sources that persisted through the extinction. Burrowing species sheltered underground. Within a few 100,000 years after the impact, mammal diversity began expanding rapidly into ecological roles previously held by dinosaurs. Early Paleothean mammals, in the first few million years after extinction, remained relatively small but began diversifying in diet and habitat. Some lineages became specialized herbivores, developing teeth adapted for grinding tough plant material. Others became carnivores, evolving shearing teeth and predatory behaviors. Some returned to water, beginning the lineage leading to whales. Others took to the air, becoming bats. Our specific lineage moved into trees. The primates emerged around 60 million years ago during the Paleocene, originating from small insectivorous mammals that had already been climbing. The earliest primates, called Plesioadaphomeans, lived in the forests covering much of North America and Europe during the warm period. They looked somewhat like modern squirrels, small, agile, with claws for gripping bark. But they were begging to develop features that would define primates: forward-facing eyes providing binocular vision, grasping hands with mobile fingers, and brains with enhanced visual processing. The transition to tree-dwelling life created specific selective pressures. Moving through a three-dimensional arboreal environment, where a misstep means a potentially fatal fall, strongly favors accurate depth perception and precise motor control. Forward-facing eyes with overlapping visual fields allow stereoscopic vision. The brain processes slightly different images from each eye to calculate precise distances. This is far more useful for judging the distance to the next branch than the wide field vision of animals living on flat ground who need to watch for predators approaching from any direction. Grasping hands evolved from holding onto branches. Early mammals had claws for digging or climbing on bark. Primates developed nails instead of claws, with sensitive pads on the fingertips underneath. The fingers became more mobile, with multiple joints allowing complex movements. Eventually, some primates evolved opposable thumbs that could press against the other fingers, creating a precision grip, allowing manipulation of small objects. This seemed like a simple adaptation for holding branches and picking fruit, but would later enable tool use in our lineage. The brain expanded to process complex sensory information and coordinate movement through three-dimensional space. Tree dwelling requires constant spatial awareness, tracking your position relative to branches, judging distance accurately, planning movement sequences where each hand and foot must reach the right location in the right order. The cerebellum, coordinating movement, expanded. Visual cortex, processing spatial information, also enlarged. Prefrontal regions, planning and decision-making, also developed further. By the Eocene, around 50 million years ago, true primates with all these characteristic features, forward-facing eyes, grasping hands with nails, enhanced brain size, were widespread and diverse. They split into two major groups: strepsirrheans, which include modern lemurs and lorises, and haplorrheans, which include tarses, monkeys, apes, and humans. Our lineage follows haplorrheans. Haplorrheans show several advantages over strepsirrheans. They rely more heavily on vision and less on smell. The snout shortens, and olfactory regions of the brain reduce, while visual regions expand further. They have a bony wall completely separating the eye socket from the jaw muscles behind it, protecting the eye and allowing the eyeball to move more freely. Their pregnancies last longer and produce fewer but more developed offspring, with expended periods of infant dependency during which parents invest substantial care in teaching. Around 40 million years ago, during the Eocene, our lineage existed as small haplorrhean primates living in tropical forests, probably resembling modern tarsiers, large-eyed, agile tree dwellers eating insects, small vertebrates, and fruit. They were social, living in small groups, where individuals recognized each other, maintained relationships, and cooperated in raising offspring and watching for predators. Social living created new selective pressures. Individuals who could read social cues, predict other behaviors, and form strategic alliances and navigate complex group dynamics left more descendants than socially inept individuals. This drove further brain expansion, particularly in regions processing social information. The anthropoids, monkeys, and apes, emerged from these early haplorrheans around 40 to 45 million years ago, possibly in Africa or Asia. Anthropoids are distinguished by larger body size, larger brains relative to body size, and increased reliance on vision over smell, longer juvenile periods with extended parental care, and more complex social structures. They split into Old World monkeys in Africa and Asia, and New World monkeys in South America. The groups separated when continental drift widened the Atlantic Ocean. Our lineage belonged to Old World anthropoids. By 30 million years ago, in the Oligocene, our ancestors were monkey-like primates living in African forests. They were fully diurnal, active during the day, with excellent color vision. Color vision is especially useful for primates eating fruit because it allows distinguishing ripe, nutritious fruit from unripe or spoiled fruit at a distance. The shift to diurnal activity, made possible because mammals no longer faced competition from large diurnal dinosaurs, allowed primates to exploit food resources available during daylight. Around 25 million years ago, the line leading to apes split from Old World monkeys. Early apes were larger than most monkeys, with more robust skeletons, no tail, and modified shoulders allowing greater arm mobility. The shoulder changes reflects a shift in locomotion. While monkeys typically run along branches on all fours, apes began using their arms for suspensory locomotion, hanging beneath branches and swinging between them. This requires mobile shoulder joints rotating through a wide range of motion. Suspensory locomotion is energetically efficient in forests where trees are spaced apart and fruit is distributed in terminal branches too thin for large animals to walk on. An ape can hang beneath a branch too weak to support walking weight, reach far out to pick fruit, and swing to the next tree without descending to the ground and climbing again. This locomotion style shaped the ape body plan. Broad chests with shoulder blades positioned on the back rather than sides, highly mobile shoulder joints, strong arm relative to legs, and shortened, stiffened spines providing stability while hanging. The Miocene, from 35 to 5 million years ago, was the golden age of apes. Dozens of ape species lived across Africa, Europe, and Asia, ranging in size from small, gibbon-like forms to much larger animals. Climate during the early and middle Miocene was warm and wet, with extensive forests. But around 8 to 10 million years ago, global cooling and drying reduced forest coverage, particularly in Africa and Eurasia. Many ape lineages went extinct. Others retreated to remaining forests. Our lineage during the late Miocene existed as large-bodied apes living in African forests. These were the last common ancestors of modern great apes and humans. They probably resembled modern chimpanzees in some ways. Strongly built, intelligent, socially complex, capable of both tree climbing and ground movement. They ate primarily fruit, supplemented with leaves, insects, and occasionally meat from hunting small animals. By 7 to 8 million years ago, our lineage had split from the lineage leading to chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. The split was driven by geography. Climate change and geological activity fragmented forests, separating populations. One population remained in dense forests and became the chimpanzee line. The other population occupied more open wetland and forest edge environments, where trees existed, but in patches rather than continuous canopy. This environmental difference created the selective pressures leading toward human-specific adaptations. The forest edge population faced different challenges than forest-dwelling apes. Food was more patchily distributed, requiring traveling longer distances between feeding sites. Open spaces between tree patches meant increased predator exposure. Standing upright to see over tall grass and traveling efficiently across open ground became advantageous. This population began spending more time on the ground and less in trees, settling the stage for the most distinctive human adaptation, habitual bipedalism, walking upright on two legs as the primary mode of locomotion. By 6 to 7 million years ago, our lineage consisted of apes showing the earliest signs of bipedal adaptation. Fossils from this period are fragmentary, but they show changes to the skull base, leg bones, and pelvis, suggesting these animals could walk upright, though probably not as efficient as later hominins. They retained long arms and curved fingers suited for climbing, indicating they still spent significant time in trees. They lived in African woodlands, eating fruit, leaves, and probably using simple tools like sticks to extract insects or crack nuts. Behaviors seen in modern chimpanzees and likely present in the last common ancestor. The stage was now set for the hominin radiation, the diversification of bipedal apes that would eventually produce modern humans. These animals stood at a threshold. They had large brains for their body size, complex social structures, flexible diets, and a body plan beginning to adapt for upright walking. The specific sequence of changes, full bipedalism, dramatic brain expansion, tool manufacture, language, and culture, happened over the next 6 million years, through a series of species we'll trace in the next chapter. But the foundations were established here in the Miocene, apes responding to environmental change by spending more time on the ground and beginning the transformation from forest-dwelling frugivore to savanna-crossing, tool-using, socially complex hominin.